Hey, what is up, mortals? It is Ellen here with a new video for you. Welcome to the first part of What If Deku Had the Rinnegan. Welcome to Season 2. I just wanted to greet you guys by saying, sit back and relax. You're in for a treat. So, we begin. Glaring lights flickered in and out of focus, blurring and blending together in what felt like a mess of colors, shapes, and sounds. His head, formerly blessed with the sort of painless quiet only being unconscious could get you, now burned and ached in 1,000 spots at once. He felt spent. Izuku came to his senses, finally, and found himself inside what looked like an ambulance. His body ached and hurt all over, with spots of dry blood clinging to his now torn hero uniform, to his skin, and to his hair all at once. Even the attempt to open his eyes made sharp pain pierce his vague sense of conscious self. They felt like he'd spent too long staring into the sun. At once, there was a paramedic hurrying to him, pointing a light at them and babbling things off to someone Izuku couldn't see. He heard something vague about his irises dilating strangely, but his focus was muddy, and he couldn't really catch most of it. "Where?" he tried to speak, but the man shut him up quickly. "Quiet. Don't talk. I'm an emergency medical personnel. We're still at the USJ. You've got a few broken bones, your throat is hurt, your left arm is in really bad shape, and you've got a concussion. You need to save your energy." His eyes widened at that. The USJ, the villains, he remembered now all too well and felt a pang of desperation flood into his veins like liquid acid as the images from the event flooded into his mind, consuming his awareness with fear and animosity. The concentric ripples of the Rinnegan suddenly burned with faint energy as he lunged forward at once, ignoring both the doctor's protests and the sharp pain in his everywhere. The monster!" he babbled off. "I have to take care of—" "You already have." And here the EMP pulled him back down a bit forcefully. "The creature is indisposed. It won't hurt anyone again. All of your classmates have been safely removed from the building and none have injuries like yours. The police are just cleaning up the remaining villains inside. Rest." And so, as his eyelids suddenly felt heavy, Izuku took in a slow breath, and did. Lights returned to him in an instant, and memory did similarly, rushing to his chest like an absolute lifeline, writhing and screeching and tearing into his brain. At once, Izuku was torn away from unconsciousness and found himself awake once again, gasping for breath and sitting up straight in a rush. Only then did he realize he was in a hospital room of some sort, clad in white silk as his fingers pulled at the fabric next to his chest. Only then did Izuku realize how cold it was, and how dry his lips were, and how utterly spent he generally felt. And only then did he recall the USJ with startling clarity, and felt panic and relief rising in his chest yet again. There were small wires connected to him by the arms and chest, and one of those medical machines which measure his heartbeat sat by his bed, humming a tone that grew faster as he sank into his thoughts. Everything hurt, but it was sort of a dull, empty ache. Finally, he stilled. Everything was okay. Everything had to be okay, for the doctors had said as much before he faded into unconsciousness. Everything was fine, which meant Izuku was fine. He'd not lost any friends that day. He was okay. They'd all lived. For an instant, the memory of the creature, the Nomu, flared up in his mind. For a second, and only in his mind, Izuku was being crushed, squeezed, torn into pieces. But that was all in his head, and he willed it away with a wave of his hand, and swore to himself that he wouldn't let it get to him. Something clicked. The door. "Midoriya! Izuku!" Two voices. Izuku barely had the time to go, "Oh, Ida and Uraraka!" before the two all but tackled him, with a pair of arms encircling him in an instant. Ida stood by his bedside anxiously, his composure forgotten. Uraraka, meanwhile, had gathered him into a nigh hysterical hug, a bit uncommon to say the least. For someone like Izuku, a shy, reserved boy, that sort of touch was a bit overwhelming, considerably more intimate than he was exactly comfortable with. But then his mind reminded him of what his battle must have looked like from their eyes, and suddenly he felt a little less embarrassed, a little more relieved. He raised the arm that wasn't skewered by cables and pat Uraraka's back a few times softly, smiling as kindly as he could through the overwhelming exhaustion he somehow still felt. "Hey, I'm okay. I really am."
"You hear that?"
someone else chimed in, sounding fond and irritated at once.
"He's okay, so stop hanging off of my patient before I have you two kicked out of the room."
That got their attention, so the two ended up giving him some space, and Izuku held on the relieved breath he was about to take. That would have been a bit offensive, probably. Instead, he turned the Rinnegan's piercing gaze towards Recovery Girl, who approached him while holding a stack of papers and a small board. She was frowning, as usual, but didn't look too angry. Instead, the old woman just looked soul-crushingly sad, looking at them like they were all a batch of puppies someone had kicked a bit too hard.
"Well, aren't you looking good?" she began. "Normally I'd criticize you thoroughly here for putting yourself in harm's way. However, since the events at the USJ were not exactly something I could expect you to be prepared for, I suppose there's not much I can do."
Izuku blinked up at her a few times. What? Am I okay then? Recovery Girl sighed in turn, digging through her pockets for packets of her strange gummies and handing them to Izuku.
"In a way. Your worst injuries were healed by my quirk. You'll have bruises, scars, and maybe a few odd fingers, but you're fine. I patched you up as best I could, and the EMTs did a good job. Truth is, we're going to need the bed here for another patient soon enough, and sending you to a hospital will accomplish nothing. So you're free, yes. I was just waiting for you to wake up."
Though her words were ominous, Izuku supposed they made sense. He felt sore all over, though, and struggled to push himself off the bed, pushing down at the bed to rise to his feet. Ida helped him up, thankfully. The boy still looked somewhere between concerned and exhausted. He flashed the two a friendly smile and walked with them out of what he knew was Yue's infirmary. Outside, it was already nearing night. How long had he been out? The question was a bit terrifying, but logic told him it couldn't be much more than a few hours. His mother must be terrified. She'd never been too fond of his dream to begin with. That he'd gotten injured while studying to fulfill it wouldn't bode well. His knees trembled slightly under his own weight, which was less than desirable. He refused Uraraka's silent offer to lean on her, though. "Why are you guys still here?" he asked after a period of silence, crossing the gates of Yue and heading outside. I mean, not that I'm not thankful. I am, but it's clearly been a while." Ida frowned at that. There was a spark of anger to his eyes almost, and he cut back instantly. "Of course we're here, Midoriya. You're our friend, and you were quite injured." He seemed grave, which only made Izuku want to apologize for something. "We were forced to watch as you put yourself in risk and almost died. Did you really think we'd not wait to know if you were all right?" Ah. Izuku felt a pang of shame fight with the strange contentment he felt. I guess that makes sense. He wished he could say things that sounded as earnest as his two friends looked. Really, they looked like they'd be scolding him if he didn't look like he was on his last legs. "I didn't, mean to worry you." "Well," Ida responded curtly, "you did." At this moment, Uraraka piped up. Unlike Ida, the girl looked less righteously angry and more irritated and concerned. Her voice, however, was firm, even if her posture was gentle. You looked like you were dead! I get why you jumped in, I do, but we're friends, aren't we? So there's no reason for you to risk doing that on your own." At this, Izuku frowned. "I didn't want to risk you two getting hurt." "So you decided to just risk yourself?" she interjected. I'm happy you stepped in, because otherwise Sensei may have..." And she trailed off there, if for but a second. "But that's not the point. I never felt that powerless before, you know? And I don't want to feel that way again. Like Ida said, we're friends. So the next time you feel like doing something risky, don't do it alone, or we'll just follow you in, okay?" And he found he had no words to say to that. And now, a word from our generous sponsors. This video is sponsored by Adobe. Adobe is redefining the digital experience through game-changing innovations that shape the next generation of storytelling. Adobe makes it easy to create, edit, and share digital documents securely, allowing you to collaborate and communicate across devices. Adobe Photoshop is your go-to application for faster graphics editing and digital art as a whole. At We the Celestials, all our thumbnails across every channel are created with Adobe Photoshop. Adobe Premiere Pro is a timeline-based and non-linear video editing software application that is versatile and easy for beginning and master editors. Finally, Adobe After Effects is the industry-standard tool for digital visual effects, motion graphics, and compositing applications used in post-production. Many of our voice actors, audio editors, and video editors use Premiere Pro and After Effects to produce these high-quality videos. In fact, I'm using Adobe Audition right now to record this audio. Click the link in the description to start creating now, and thank you to Adobe for sponsoring this video. Recovery was a slow progress, a day-to-day thing. When he got home, with both of his friends' help because he was barely on his feet out of exhaustion and he insisted he didn't need to call a cab, his mother had been nigh hysterical, and after assuring her that, "Yes, Mom, I promise I'm okay," and every other reassurance he could offer, Izuku had gone up to his room and collapsed without as much as a meal to fill his stomach, and prepared to wake up the next day feeling just as miserable as he had when he went to sleep. Or so he thought, because he soon found himself in what appeared to be a dream. Looking around, he found that he was still in his room, but the windows were wide open, revealing that there was absolutely nothing outside. The lights were off, yet it was bright as if they weren't, the sort of even lighting that nothing could really produce. To his shock, Izuku noted he was wearing his ruined hero costume, with dried blood sticking to his sleeves and an old ache settled on his bones. Sitting in front of him by the end of his bed was an odd, ominous-looking cloaked man whose head was mostly obscured by the hood he was wearing. Dark fabric pooled to the ground for the man's wide shoulders, and an orange mask with a flame pattern painted in black decorated his face, with a single opening for an eye to peek through. Messy and spiky black locks could barely be seen from underneath the hood he wore, and his posture was calm.
You put on quite a show, didn't you?
What?
Back in the USJ, that was quite a show. I expected you to flourish, but not this quickly. Color me impressed, Midoriya Izuku.
Who are you exactly? How do you know about that? Confusion and a hint of panic colored his tone, bitter and tired. His eyes felt weird. How did you get in my room? The man chuckled.
Don't worry about that. You're dreaming. As for me, call me a friend for now. I've been watching your progress for quite a while now and decided you had earned a little bit of a reward for your troubles. So here's a little tip. What you did to that abomination of theirs, the Nomu, it went deeper than just the body would tell you.
Deeper than the body would tell me?
Oh, yes, he responded. You'll learn more about that tomorrow, don't worry. But yes, there is more to you, to your eyes, than any science can ever learn. Yours isn't a mastery over life, but over spirit. I leave you with that, little hero.
Man's science is nothing to God.
From beneath his hood, from beneath his mask, the man's eyes flared red in a dangerous flash. And suddenly Izuku was drowsy and tired, and his bed felt oh so welcoming. His muscles relaxed, his mind stilled, and he fell back into unconsciousness yet again. Yet the red of the man's eyes refused to leave his mind. He would have nightmares about it for days to come. You'd never expect that, but Yue announced that classes would not be stopped by the events that took place at the USJ. It took some convincing to allow his mother to let him go, but come time for classes to begin, Izuku was clad in his uniform, still bandaged all over, and had his two friends by his side in a conspicuously empty classroom. Some people sneaked glances at him, others avoided looking at him at all, but the awkwardness and the tension was as clear to him as anything, and when he asked Uraraka about it, her face contorted into something like a grimace, and she spoke.
Well, some people were a bit spooked, I guess.
By the creature? Izuku asked her, remembering how absolutely terrifying the being had been, with an exposed brain and more powerful than anything not named All Might. Yeah, it was pretty scary, wasn't it? But she shook her head.
No, not the creature. You. They saw how you ended the fight, you know? And some people didn't think much of it, but...
Ah. A violent bout of cold apprehension welled up within him. Ah. Even Ida, whose concern for his health was clear as day, averted his eyes from Izuku at Uraraka's admission, confirming his worst fears. His classmates weren't afraid of the creature, the Nomu. They were afraid of him. They had seen how he'd fought, how he'd what, killed it? Neutralized it? More, something in the back of his mind supplied, sounding eager and ominous at once. But killed would work. He had killed it, the Nomu, ripped its life from its body in one fell swoop. With but his hands and his eyes, he had made it die in an instant. He looked around. Aside from his friends, not a single person looked back. The door clicked open, and everyone was torn away from this distraction as a veritable mummy walked in. Were it not for the clothes the figure was clad in, Izuku would have had no idea who it was. However, as that was not the case, he felt concern welling up within him instead. "Sensei!" he called out. Are you sure you should?" "I'm fine," Aizawa cut in. "I received the best treatment possible and am already healing from my injuries. We have more important things to address, however." The temperature dropped almost instantly. If the silence before was tense, this one was bone-chilling, almost maddening. Each and every student there found themselves reminiscing on the horrors of the USJ, consumed by the memories that played out within their heads. That the statement came from Aizawa, who still looked like a damn mummy, made it all the more intense. And then he spoke words none would ever forget. "The sports festival is coming up." Silence. Kirishima broke first.
"Wait, what?"
"Thank you all for sticking around, and I hope that you enjoyed. Before you leave, we would just like to let you know that We the Celestials has many other channels for your entertainment and viewing purposes. All the information you'll need is right below here in the description, so feel free to check out all the other incredible projects our team creates. Secondly, on behalf of We the Celestials, I'd like to thank everyone involved in the production of today's awesome content. Their details will be in the description below. That's all for today's video, so goodbye and have a divine day.